Well, Marc Eliot, it is great to have you today come by. Thanks for jumping in.
My pleasure.
Well, we are actually going to be hitting the road, you and I, next month
That's right.
down in Las Vegas. What's going to happen in Vegas is going to stay in Vegas unless you're there in our audience. We're going to talk about movies and have some fun. But I'm so glad to have you in today. And I was looking through my bookshelf this morning before I came in, and I have a number of books of yours. Of course, I've got this one handy, Donna Summer's autobiography that you guys did together. You wrote a Charlton Heston book. I think I have your Ronald Reagan book too. So you have quite. How many books have you written, Mark?
I've now written 30 books.
Oh, stop bragging like that. You have are an amazingly prolific, and these are not just, when celebrities say they wrote a book, really means like a celebrity pastor just had his sermons put into a book, or somebody else had their talk shows put in a book. But when you say you wrote a book, you really write books.
Yeah, it's kind of what my reputation is, such as it is, that my books are heavily researched and quite detailed. That's the way I like to do them.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes accessibility is not the most important thing. I find that when you do so-called authorized biographies, which I almost never do unless it says so and so and me, I've done three or four of those, um, that the information you get is very one-sided, very non-objective or subjective.
Right.
Uh, I know when I did the Eagles book, for example, To the Limit, that blew into an all-out war between the Eagles camp and my camp, which was a camp of one. Um, I had Irving Azoff. I had some pretty good people on my side of the battlefield. Um, but David Geffen was somebody who wanted to be a part of the book from my end of it because he
Hmm.
and Henley were always at war. But sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not so easy. But it all depends upon the passion behind the project, I think.
All right.
If
You just skimmed over very quickly, but I think our audience wants to know. Henley and Geffen were at war with each other?
Oh yeah, I'll explain it to you if you'd like. When when the '60s turned into the '70s and Greenwich Village shifted, everybody from the village moved out to Los Angeles, and the Troubadour became the new folk city.
Hmm.
It was a breeding ground for a new kind of music that was a reaction to the '60s. It was apolitical. It was non-lyrical in the sense of a Dylan or a Tim Hardin. It became very much a kind of an adult sound that was played in a youthful way.
Hmm.
Um, that's what the Troubadour was. The '70s, with all the coke and the pot and all that poured into the place at the time, when Doug Weston owned it. Doug was a good friend of mine, and so I saw the scene from many different angles.
Right.
Uh, After Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and sometimes Young, hit it big, everybody wanted a group, a harmony group with great lyrics and great players. Um, at that time, the members, the future members of the Eagles they all had come from somewhere else. Nobody was a local Los Angelian,
Hmm.
and they all wanted to be individual stars. They wanted to be like Elton John or Bob Dylan.
Right.
Uh, and that wasn't what record companies were looking for. They wanted the next Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Hmm.
So at the time, David Geffen and his partner at the time, Elliot Roberts, both had begun in the mailroom at William Morris in New York City. They were looking to be agents, and that's where you start at the William Morris agency,
Right.
sorting mail.
Right.
Um, Geffen was a pretty funny guy. He used to open up all the mail to the agent, read them, see who was doing what, read
Wow.
the envelopes, and that's really how he became aware of what was happening.
Mm.
Um, he went out to L.A. He wanted to start his own agency, his own management company, actually. He partnered up with Elliot Roberts, who actually was my older brother's best friend growing up in New York City, with Elliot Rabinowitz. Uh, Became Elliot Roberts. He and Geffen met. They started Geffen Roberts, which was a management company.
No kidding.
The first act they had was Joni Mitchell,
Hmm.
who Elliot had discovered playing, I think, in a Philadelphia club, and knew immediately that this was somebody he could work with. Anyway, they opened up offices at 9000 Sunset Boulevard. Some people may know that magical number. It's a big agent management building right at the tip of Beverly Hills.
Right.
And Geffen went out looking for talent. And the place he went to was the Troubadour,
The
because
Troubadour.
a couple of other clubs too that were playing. There was a country club in North Hollywood where
Right.
Dwight Yoakam began, but mainly it was the Troubadour. And at the time, um, Henley was always a shy guy who was sitting at the end of the bar, and nobody really knew who he was. Linda Ronstadt was walking around barefooted with no bra, telling everybody that she was in this band, the Stone Ponies, and that they were going to be big. They had signed a contract. And then there was Glenn Frey. Frey came out of Detroit. He came to LA and he roomed with another aspiring unknown musician, J.D. Souther.
Of course.
Uh, and the reason that they roomed together was because Fry was going out with Souther's sister. So they were living in Silver Lake, which is a little suburb of LA proper, or Hollywood. It was at the time a low rent district. Now it's a high rent district.
Right.
Um, Below them, there was a guy who every morning woke up at 8 o'clock and started pounding the piano and drove these two guys crazy. They finally went down to him one day and they said, "Hey, what are you doing at 8 o'clock?" Well, that was Jackson Brown.
Wow.
And so in this one building, J.D. Souther, you
Amazing.
Glenn Fry, and below them you had Jackson Brown. Now, Jackson actually was one of those musicians who came from the Village. A lot of people associate him with the Troubadour in L.A., but he actually began in the late '60s in the folk circuit of the Village and the
Hmm.
Boogle and all those
But
clubs.
he's from SoCal originally.
Originally from Southern California, but like everybody who went to the Village, nobody was from New York.
Right.
Phil Ochs was from Ohio. Dylan was from Missouri. They
Minnesota.
all Minnesota. They all came to the Village because that's where the scene was. And
Right.
then when the scene shifted to Los Angeles, they all went to Los Angeles
Right.
sooner or later. The Mamas and the Papas, that was a New York group that reformed in LA. Anyway, Geffen was looking to put a group together. He kind of heard Fry play, Glenn Fry, and he said to him, I'm interested in managing you, but not as an individual.
Mm,
I'm looking for a group. Can you put a group together?
mm.
And so Fry had already had a record deal with a small label. The same label had a deal with Don Henley.
Hmm.
Henley had been brought to LA by Kenny Rogers. Kenny Rogers had
Wow.
heard Henley's band in somewhere north of Dallas when he was on tour, when Kenny Rogers was on tour.
No
And
kidding.
here's how they met. Um, Henley's band went to a clothing store to buy matching shirts. And at the same time, Kenny Rogers was in there sprucing up his wardrobe. And so they met on the floor of this clothing store in Texas. And Henley said, we love your music, and I've got a band. And Kenny said, well, I'd love to hear it, And
Oh my
came to
goodness.
hear them in a local group and said, I want you guys to come to LA. I'm going to get you a deal. And did with this small label. Well, as it happened, was the same label that Glenn Fry was on.
Mm.
And so they used to pass each other in the hall, two separate albums that they had, not very good. Um, Longfellow something, I forgot what the names of the groups were, but they really didn't do anything. But they both hung out at the Troubadour.
Hmm.
So when Geffen said, put a group together, he went to Henley. He said, "Do you want to be in this group with me?" And then they got two or three others, Bernie Ledden
Right.
and another musician, all who were kind of looking for work. They some of them came from Poco,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
was really the beginning of the country folk thing. Some of them played um, Nelson, Ricky Nelson.
Right.
And so there was already a simmering rock country sound that was developing, helped along by this whole Western atmosphere that LA has that New York does not have.
Right.
New York is strictly urban beats, tough, that kind of thing. LA always was a much softer, more open place, open sound.
Right.
Uh, so they put together this band, and Geffen sent them to Colorado. He rented out a house for them in Colorado to go up and learn how to be a band. They played in local clubs, and they slowly became good enough to come back to Los Angeles. Just
Mm.
at that time, Linda Ronstadt uh, was breaking out as a solo act
Right.
after the Sony thing. And her manager, really wonderful guy, her manager got her a gig at Disneyland, and she needed a band to play behind her.
Right.
And she went to Fry, who she knew from the front of the Troubadour. The front of the Troubadour is where everything happened. It's you walk in, it's a big bar, and then behind the bar you walk into the showroom where the acts take place. But everybody hung out at the front of the bar,
Right.
and that's where everything took place: drugs, sex, deals.
Mm.
I'll meet you later. All this, all that. Um, she hired the
The
Eagles.
Eagles to be her backup band.
At Disneyland. And
Right.
what the manager told me was that that was the only time. Other places have said that they played with her on a tour. They never toured with her. They
Right.
played one day at Disneyland
Mm.
out in Anaheim.
Oh my
And
goodness.
they said to each other, we don't need Linda Ronstadt. We're good enough to go out on our own.
Mm.
Geffen signed them,
Mm.
and rest is history.
So, but
So,
that's how does the bad blood? Where does that start, though?
well, the bad blood, yeah, the bad blood
By the
came.
way, that was a remarkable detour that you took
Yeah,
us on there. That's why you're the storyteller.
yeah, I'm known for those detours. Geffen decided to start his own record label, and that record label was called Asylum.
Right.
See, he was looking to manage, have some publishing, and also have the record company.
So he was the
So
original 360.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he wasn't the original, but he was one of them.
Hmm.
One of the early guys who understood the business much more than the show, and understood that he was business and not show.
Hmm.
So he went to the Eagles, and Henley, more than the other members, was into this whole anti-corporate thing, which he still is into.
Right.
I don't want to be a corporate band. I don't want to have to please all the executives. I want to do my own thing. And so Geffen said, "Well, I will let you do that. It's an independent label, and you guys can do whatever you want, and I'll put it out, and I'll back you, and I'll promote you,
Mm.
and I'll get you Glyn Johns out there in London to produce you." Glyn Johns was the producer of The Who, so a rock and roll guy.
Right.
And um, so Henley said, "Okay." They did two albums for Geffen,
Right.
both of them big sellers. The first one more than the second one. First one had "Take It Easy," which was a Jackson Browne song.
Mm.
JD was on the album. So it was Linda Ronstadt sang backup on a couple of songs. It was a very family affair.
Mm.
And then the second album, Desperados, kind of tanked. It was a little bit, I don't know. Today it's considered a great album.
Hmm.
Back then it was considered a little bit fringy for
Mm.
what LA was looking for.
Mm.
They And then Geffen sold the label to Warner Electra
We are.
Atlantic,
Right.
and Henley went ballistic
Mm.
because the last thing he wanted to do was to work for a corporate record label.
Got
The
it.
whole purpose of signing with Geffen was not to do that.
Mm.
And then Geffen did what all business people do. You start a business,
Sure.
you make it successful, you sell it. That's where
Sure.
the money,
Sure.
like the Pizza Hut people. You
Mhm.
know, so you start with a crust and you wind up a billionaire. So Geffen did what business guys do. Before he had sold the company, Geffen was so clever. He signed a solo deal with Henley, uh, so that they could treble all their profits. He figured, like John Lennon doing a solo album.
Hmm.
These guys were money, and he wanted to make as much as he could.
Right.
So after he sold the album, sold the record label to WEA, Henley went ballistic. He didn't want to work with Geffen anymore.
Right.
He still owed Geffen two albums, two solo albums, which they went to war over. Okay, so that's why they hated each other.
Mm.
Geffen felt, I made Henley a star, and now he doesn't want to honor his commitment.
Right.
Henley's position was, this guy was an independent label who sold us out to the corporations. Now we have to work for them. That's where the battle came. Now, when I wrote the book, To the Limit, which still in print, still generating royalties. I went to the first day I decided to write the book. I was living with a girl who knew Irving Azoff rather well. And I said to her, look, why don't you send Irving a fax? Say, Mark is going to write this book about the Eagles, and he'd love to talk to them. So Irving Azoff, who can be not the nicest guy in the world, if you're on the wrong side of him, if anybody who knows him will concur. He sent back a fax saying, not only would I not talk to the Eagles, but nobody in Los Angeles will talk to me. And
Mm.
I might as well pack my bags and go back to New York. I was already
Wow.
living in LA for 10 years. He said,
Wow.
because you will never, not only the Eagles, but nobody in the music business will ever talk to you.
Mm.
Well, I took that as all the more reason to want to write this book. And I did. And of course, everybody, Randy Meisner, the great Randy Meisner, who was an original Eagle, talked to me. Everybody talked to me except the Eagles and David Geffen.
Wow.
Geffen also, I got a message, I'm too busy, I can't talk to you.
Right.
I finished the book, gave it to my publisher. It's kind of a wild story. That's what I remember all of this. My publisher was Little Brown for that book. Little Brown was an independent, still is an independent subsidiary of Warner Brothers.
Ooh.
Yeah. And because they were independent, they didn't have to answer to Warner Brothers. At the top of the Warner Brothers pyramid, of all the corporations they have, the single biggest moneymaker in the history of the company are the Eagles. So when Irving Azoff found out that the book was being published by Warner Brothers, he went, it was like an atomic bomb went off in Los Angeles. What was that? An earthquake? No. Found out about this book. So now the publisher was stuck in a very difficult position. They couldn't cancel the book. I mean, they could, but it would cost them a fortune and very bad publicity. It would not look good to cede to the management of a subject.
Right.
You just don't do that. They also didn't want to lose the Eagles. They didn't want to offend Azoff because it's a powerhouse guy,
Right.
you know. So all kind of conferences started taking place, and there was the head of the publishing company, not my editor, but the head of the company, kept on getting Azoff to agree to talk to me one-on-one. I'm not going to talk to that guy. I told him not to write the book. So the head of the publisher said, look, talk to him. What are your objections to the book? And we'll try to get him to work with you.
Right.
Well, the big objection was the book was already in galleys. Galleys are proof copies of books that go out for review. They're advanced copies, no cover, just a proof copy,
Right.
like a photo. People hated Don Henley so much, as I discovered when I was writing the book, that one of his former lawyers who had handled a very touchy case, I happened to find out who he was. I called him up and I said, look, I'm writing this book. Can I talk to you? Sure, come on up. Come to my office. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you. Sometimes those guys, when they hear book and they want to get their name in print, they lay out the red or the yellow carpet, whatever carpet they have. He had handled a very serious case with Don Henley, where Henley almost went to prison. It had to do with an underage girl, and
isn't that what he wrote the song "Dirty Laundry" about?
He wrote the song "Dirty Laundry." He told me later he wrote it about this book.
About your book?
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, Mark. You inspired a great song.
Yeah. And then later he said it was about the blonde.
The bubble-headed bleach blonde?
Yeah, the one who was on KABC, I think she was on.
It comes on at 5.
Who knows?
Well, Mark, I think you just inserted yourself into rock history. You inspired a great song, so don't take a bow.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. No. Okay. Henley did not want that story in the book. And that became something of a bargaining chip. But in the midst of all this, I must tell you, let me just insert just for a second. When I finished that book, it was 2 years of war. with people. Just no, I can't. Yes, I can. No, I can't. No, I won't. And I was exhausted. So I have a house in the country where I go to get away from everything. I went up there. The first day I said, I'm not going to do anything for a month. I'm just going to sleep, eat, watch movies, listen to music, and not talk to anybody. The first morning I got there, this whole thing began with a fax from my publisher saying, "Oh, we got this letter from Irving Azoff, and we need to talk to them." Oh God, really? About a month into that negotiation, it became very clear um, that we weren't going to be able to get together on this. And then one morning, about 10 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang. And by this time, I didn't want to answer any more calls. They were
Right.
all bad. I picked it up and I heard a voice on the other end say, "Is this Marc Eliot who wrote the Eagles book, which hadn't come out yet?" I said, "Yes." Well, hold for David Geffen. Okay. So, and then another voice. There were like two or three secretaries who kept on saying, "Okay, David's right. Okay, we'll get Dave." And then David got on the phone. "Mark, my best pal.
Mm.
Mark, how are you? How's everything?" Well, we chatted for a few minutes. I didn't know him, but we chatted anyway because that's David Geffen.
Right.
And then he said, "Hey, I just read this book that you wrote about the Eagles." Well, I said, "Well, the book hasn't been published yet. It's in galleys, but they've been secured.
Right.
Nobody can get them
Right.
except very few people are allowed to even see those."
Right.
"Don't worry about it," he said. "I got a copy." He said, "Don't worry." And I want to tell you, it's great. I love what you did, except there are a few things you didn't know. And I said, "Well, David, I tried to call you, if you remember, but you were too busy." "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. But there are some things that you need to know
Mm.
to make this book work." I said, "Well, the book is already written." "Well, don't worry about that." He said, "I'm going to call your publisher and I'm going to tell them that you're going to redo the book after you spend some time with me,
Whoa.
and then the book will be perfect." So here I am, on the edge of exhaustion from this, and I've got Geffen telling me, in effect, to redo the book.
Mm.
My publisher calls me, and they say, the president of the company calls and said, "Geffen called us. He wants you to redo the book. We will repay you what we originally paid." We're talking six figures here. "We'll repay you. All
Right.
you have to do is talk to Geffen and talk to Irving Azoff, who is."
Oh.
And the reason why Azoff said he would talk to me is because he found out that Geffen was talking to me.
Right.
And he said, "Well, I can't let Geffen turn this book into something against me.
Right.
I'll talk to him."
And you got double payment.
Yeah, exactly. So
Sweet.
back to the drawing board. I spent hours with Geffen, who had amazing, the kind of stuff that only he would have.
Mm-hmm.
The inside stuff that you normally don't get when you
Mm.
write like that. Azoff said to me, "How would you like to talk to Don Henley?" I said, "Well, I've been trying to talk to him for 2 years."
Mm.
"All you have to do is take out this one thing in the book, and Henley will talk to you." The publisher said, "Well, that sounds reasonable." Yeah. "No," I said, "that's not coming out. I will modify it. I will tamp it down a little bit and try to put some context into it. But it, it's a biography. It's an important story. It's a rock
Right.
and roll story.
Right.
All right. So you minimalize it as much as you can,
Right.
and and then you and Henley can get together. So I go back to Los Angeles.
By the way, Mark, I'm having a PTSD flashback. When I wrote my first book, I asked Amy Grant's management to use a photo of her, and they said, "Well, show us the chapter," and I did, and they said, "We won't let you use the photo unless you change the word 'she divorced her husband' to 'they were divorced.'"
Wow.
And I said, "Fine, what do I care? Fine, they were divorced." So
I mean, you
yeah, there
get
were,
so much of that when you. So that's what I was saying before, where sometimes authorized books are not as good as real biographies.
right,
I understand what you're saying. The ego involved, and especially with an Amy Grant who's into all of that
right.
high
Well,
stuff.
both were true, so I felt okay. It wasn't like it was not true, but she did
Yeah.
initiate it, but they wanted it to be they were divorced. So anyway, continue.
So I leave my home up there, in Woodstock, and go back to LA. And I go up to Irving Azoff's office, and this is before they moved to the Live Nation place
Right.
on Wilshire Boulevard. I walked in. It was like a 16-year-old's den. Guitars everywhere, jukeboxes, Coke machines,
Coca, is
beautiful
that Coca-Cola or cocaine? Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
Okay.
Who knows? What if you press the button? Beautiful secretary, that whole thing.
Right.
And I walk in, and Azov, who once tried to run me out of town like Frank Miller in High Noon, he is suddenly, "Hi, Mark." He said, "Come on in. Oh, what would you like to drink? Don will be here in a few minutes." And meanwhile, in the conference room, they've catered. What's that big restaurant that's on Melrose and also out in? They serve a special chicken dish that everybody loves. I
Oh
forgot
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know
some
what you're
big
talking about.
this restaurant. The whole place is catered with enough chicken to feed, an army.
Right.
He says, "Don will be here in a few minutes." He says, "I just want to ask you something." He said, "Before we begin, my pal," he said, "you had something in the book um, where I said, well, before you ask me that, are you going to ask me about the snake in the mailbox?" "Oh, no, 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 no." He said, but that was just a joke. So you know that story? He put a rattlesnake in his mother-in-law's mailbox. So when she would open the pie, the outside mailbox. And I had that story in the book. And he said, "Well, that was just a joke." "Oh, I see. Well, very
Some
funny."
joke. Right.
He said, "No, the thing I want to ask you is who called me a little Hitler?" Somebody I had interviewed called Irving Little Hitler. And I said, "Well, I can't tell you. I can't tell you who said that. It's confidential.
Right.
You could tell me.
Mm.
You can tell me. I said, "Well, I just can't tell you." And for the rest of the time that I worked on the book, the only thing he wanted to know was
Wow.
who said that. It was like he had the Soprano gang,
Right.
ready to pounce on this
Well, Mark,
person.
here's your chance to tell the world who little Hitler was.
Uh, Sorry.
How about when
I
how about when he passes away, we do it.
Yeah, or as Susan Hayward said in that film, "I Want to Live."
Right.
Um, then Henley comes in, and Henley. I always liked him personally. I always thought he was a supremely talented guy, great voice, terrific songwriter. He comes in and says, "Okay, let's get going," And so we sit down at the conference table, all this food surrounding us. I take out my tape recorder. He takes out his tape recorder.
Mm.
He says, "Look, I'm going to tape this because I want to make sure that what I say you don't change."
Right.
Fine, fine. I said, "It's fine with me." So we sat there a couple of hours, and slowly, over the course of 10 days, I guess, he
10
changed.
days?
Yeah, not all day every day, a couple of hours. At the end of the day, I'd go to the office, he'd be there, and we'd talk. After about a week, Henley said to me, he completely changed. He started talking about things that I really wanted to know about: his childhood, his best friends, how he got into drums, but on a different level than you would normally get. Texas, growing up in Texas, who he listened, who his influences were, what his father was like, stuff I really wanted to know. Then he said at the end of one session, he said, "Let's go get something to drink." Well, that sounds good to me. We went to that Hawaiian restaurant right across from Warner Brothers. I think it's still there, Formosa. This is where John Wayne used to go every night at 5 o'clock after filming at that Warner Brothers set off of Sunset. And he'd go and he'd get plastered. And they had that old bartender who was like 1,000 years old, who knew everybody. And they had the pictures all signed. It's a great place to go. So Henley and I went there a couple of times and had a few drinks, and he became kind of friends, in a very stretch of that word. And then one night he said, "Where else do you want to go? Well, let's go somewhere else." So I said, "Well, what about the Troubadour?" And he said, "All right." He said, "I haven't been there in a while, but okay, let's go." So drove up to the Troubadour. It was about 7 o'clock, 7:30. We walk in, place is empty, dead, nobody there. It was a young bartender, a girl, very pretty, very young, and she comes over to us and this is hi. She says, "I had no idea who Henley was." This is 1996 or 7, and they were there the last time in the 70s, so she wasn't even born when the Eagles were the Eagles. She says, to Henley, "What would you like?" And Henley says, "I'd like it to be the way it was 25 years ago."
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, just a moment
Wow.
that I just stood there and I saw everything in that moment, all the longing, all the past,
Was this
all
around 1990, Mark?
1997, 1998,
Okay.
when I was writing the last writing of the book. I think the book came out in 97, so this is maybe 96 or early 97.
He's wishing it's 1970.
70, just when they were together.
Wow.
And it was quite moving to me because he said it spontaneously, and he didn't say it with any kind of emotion. I wish it was. He just said, "I wish it was like it was 25 years ago." Just a thought that came
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
and that actually made it into the book.
Wow.
And
Incredible.
anyway,
Incredible. What an incredible story. Man, we spent a half an hour on that. We could spend another 10 hours. We could spend 10 days together too if we don't watch it here. But
well, that's what we did last year at Freedom Fest.
that's a great one. Yeah, we'll do it again this summer. But I just the other ones that I really jumped out. I mean, I want to hear about you first of all, but I want to talk briefly about Chuck Heston and Donna Summer. What really impacted me about this book that really you helped my child rearing because there's a great story in here that you managed to capture with Donna about she was explaining to her children, why they should trust her. And she said, remember, I'm somebody you can trust, and I'm like a person. I think she took them to a bookshelf, and she said, "What's on the very top of the bookshelf?" And they said, "Well, Mommy, we can't see that." She said, "But I can, and I can see things that you can't see. And so if you'll trust me, I will see things that you can't see, and I'll be your eyes and ears of things that you need to know but can't see." I just thought that was what a great story, way to explain that to kids, and I've never forgotten that.
She was first of all, she was a delight to work with. I must say, sometimes when you work with celebrities, it can be a little bit difficult. My favorite person of all the people I co-wrote with was James Brown. I loved him going in, and I loved him more going out. He was
Mm,
just everything you heard about him was wrong about
mm,
how he felt about journalists, writers. He was wonderful, funny too, very very funny guy. Donna was very family oriented. When I interviewed her, it was before she moved, she and her family to Nashville.
Nashville, right.
But she was living, when I wrote the book, in one of the Donald Trump buildings on Riverside Drive.
Mm,
Uh, and she was very open. She was open and guarded at the
right.
same time.
Yeah.
She talked a lot about Germany,
Right.
about her time in Germany and uh, Giorgio Moroder, and how that whole thing came about. And then I, asked her the loaded question about what she said about uh,
Gay
gay
people.
people.
Right.
And, she claimed she was misquoted and she
Right.
didn't know what it was. But those kind of things, they don't go away.
Yeah.
Once you can't put that cork back on
Especially
that
when
bottle.
you're on Geffen Records, right?
Yeah, well, she was on
But she
not
was
get
on Mercury for, but then she was on Geffen after that, I think.
she was on the fellow who did Casablanca
Right.
records.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where she was. And
But she was on Geffen for Cats Without Claws, Mark.
I think after she left, after the fellow died, remember the head of Casablanca? I can't
Yeah.
think of.
Yeah. He
He
was,
he was he was a competitor with. He had Casablanca records. That was
right.
his. And then he died. I think the label was sold, and then she wound up with Geffen.
I think she was Casablanca, then on Mercury for Works Hard for the Money, then for some reason with Geffen for Cats Without Claws.
I believe she went to Geffen because he would take her. There was she had a problem there
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah.
A lot of problems. She wanted to get away from disco.
Right.
Nobody wanted to hear her sing anything but "Love to Love You, Baby." I mean, that was her,
Right.
and she was a great. She put on a great show. She was great on stage,
Yeah.
but nobody wanted to hear her sing with Barbara Streisand, or that was not her place. But that's where she wanted to go.
Right.
It was a little bit frustrating for her. She moved to Nashville to try to, again, open up a different side of her.
Yeah.
Uh,
And raise
when
her family, right? So,
Yeah, and
yeah.
her daughter became a well-known actress. She was on a couple of TV sitcoms. Just everybody was really nice.
Well, Mark, I don't know if I told you the story, but I came this close to doing a song with her. In fact, her husband, Bruce, of course, and so Bruce actually made the demo for me, and we just had to add her vocal to it. This is for a movie I did back in 2011, and then they went silent, and I thought, man, what have I, what happened here? I'm just waiting for her vocal, and then we're ready to go. That was a song. I can't remember the name of the song, but anyway, 6 months go by, and all of a sudden in the news, Donna Summer dead of cancer. And that was it. That was what happened. She got cancer just before she did her vocal for me, and that's why she dropped out. So, boy, talk about missing it by inches. I'm so disappointed by that.
she was young when she died, relatively young.
Right.
Bruce, you mentioned her husband, Bruce Sedano, a wonderful guy. He's got his own career, but he used to be in her backup band on
Right.
stage and kind of conduct. Um, he's a good guy. They invited me to her funeral in Nashville, which I went to, and it was quite extraordinary. The
Mm,
people who were there, the love that people had for her.
yeah.
I liked her. She was from Boston. Um, she was a witness to a murder. Do you know that story?
No, I don't.
She was coming home from school or someplace, and there was a street murder, a gang murder of kids. One killed another one, and they knew she had witnessed it, and they told her they were going to kill her if she didn't leave town and disappear. So she came to New York, um, and tried out for the Broadway production of Hair. Hair began at the
Right.
public, and then they moved to Broadway,
Right.
the musical Hair. And she tried out for the lead. She didn't get it, but they offered her the German production.
Nice. So that's how she ended up in Germany and met her husband, Mr. Summer.
She went to Germany, got married, um, and was doing commercials
Hmm.
while she was in Hair. And one of the producers of the commercials was Giorgio Moroder,
Oh,
who heard that voice and invited her to do some recording for him, and that's how it all started.
amazing. Just
Yeah.
amazing. Well, two of the many, many people you've written about. Of course, Chuck Heston. We have talked briefly about Chuck. Did you actually, this is a book, you didn't write it with him, you wrote it about him, right?
Charlton Heston was somebody I always liked. I always thought he was a good movie star, more of a movie star than an actor,
Right.
but always got a bad deal.
Now, explain that, Mark. Movie star versus actor.
Some movie stars have an appeal. You will go to see them no matter what they're in. Like Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt is a movie star. I wouldn't say, and I love his work. I wouldn't say Brad Pitt is the greatest actor in the world.
Right.
Robert De Niro, early Robert De Niro.
Got it.
That's a guy who you went to see him act. But
Right.
Brad Pitt is a guy that you go to the movies because it's Brad Pitt, and women love him, they want to see him, and all that. So there are movie stars, and there are movie stars who act. Heston was a movie star who never got really the chance to develop into the kind of actor he wanted to be.
Hmm.
And there were a lot of reasons for that.
Hmm.
The Ten Commandments, one reason, Ben-Hur, the second reason,
Right.
and then after that, choices that he made. Anyway, I wanted to write about him. And my publisher at the time said, "Well, who do you want to write about? Who would you like to do a biography of?" I said, "Well, Charlton Heston." And they said, "Okay." So I called his son, Fraser Heston.
Frasier. Hmm.
Fraser is a producer, a writer,
Hmm.
has his own production company. I called him up and I said, "Look, I want to write a book about your dad." Now, you'll have to understand that Heston had such a bad reputation after the gun thing.
He was his NRA, he was what, the president of the NRA, wasn't he?
He wasn't the president, but he was the spokesperson for. The president was this other fellow who I actually spent some time with. I forget his name, but they hired Heston for a one-off to be at this festival, this gun rights festival, the NRA festival,
Right.
and he loved it. He at the time, his movies weren't doing so well. He wasn't getting a lot of work, and he
Right.
wanted in front of an audience.
Right.
And then they made him the spokesperson, and he did the over my dead hands thing.
Right.
So when I decided to write about him, he had just died. He died, well, not just a few years
Yeah.
earlier.
I was at his funeral. It was an incredible funeral. There was Oliver Stone, and I mean, it
Yeah.
was a very bipartisan funeral, actually.
Well, he had been a big liberal.
Right.
Uh,
Civil rights guy.
so he was at the Civil Rights March. He
Yep.
organized it with Belafonte and Brando. Brando
Yep.
was his next door neighbor.
Yep.
Anyway, I called Fraser, and I said, "Look, I want to write this book about your dad, but I'll only do it if you will open up the files. If you
Wow.
let me have free access.
Hmm.
Well, Fraser, when you're the son of someone like Charlton Heston, who's got such bad press toward the
Right.
end,
Right.
you're a little wary about what's this guy going to do?
Sure.
What is crucify my father, who's already
Sure.
been crucified 3 times in films? I said, well, can we meet?
Yeah.
So we went to Musso and Frank's, old restaurant, old classic restaurant on Hollywood Boulevard.
Right.
He showed up, and his lawyer showed up, and it was me. We sat down, we talked, and after about an hour, Fraser said, you know something? I'm not going to write this book. My sister isn't going to write this book. You might as well write it. Yeah, we'll give you
Oh,
everything, he said. And
great.
that's how the book came about.
Wow.
And true to his word, once we started writing, nothing was off limits. It wasn't that much. It's not a scandal in his life except
Right.
the gun thing.
Right.
But the whole, especially the early part of his life when he was becoming Charlton Heston,
Right.
what he came from was so fascinating. I'll tell you a funny story. I think it's a funny story. Um, Fraser has his offices. When you go to Melrose, it's Paramount is on the Paramount Studios. You drive down Melrose,
Right.
west to east,
Yeah.
and you make a left, and you're on the big arch.
Yeah.
Perpendicular to that, there's a little street,
Yeah.
and they have studios, little small studios.
Was
Um,
that Is that Raleigh Studios?
I have to think of the name. It might be Raleigh.
Anyway.
It's right near Paramount,
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
and so Fraser said, "Well, come on over to because I've got all kind of stuff here, and then we'll get a bite to eat, and we'll hang out." Fraser and I actually became really good friends. I talk to him now a lot, and we built up a good trust.
Mm-hmm.
So the first day I go there, I drive onto the lot. There's a pass waiting for me. Not that I think you needed it, but there was a pass there. Pull up my car, I park, and this other car comes up next to me, and out steps the most beautiful woman you've ever seen in your life, which is every woman in LA at that age. And she looks at me, she goes, "Hi." "Hi," I say. She says, my name is so and so, and so nice to meet you. And hey, here's my phone number. So I say to myself, well, this only happens in Hollywood. Not only that, but only at this studio.
Right.
Usually the other way around. But so I go up to Fraser's office and I say, and you won't believe what happened to me. Yeah, some girl came over to you and gave you her number, right? Yeah. He said, that's what they do here. He said, I have to sweep them off the stoop when I get to work because they're all waiting for me. It's just the way it is. He said, don't pay it any mind.
Wow.
So
I thought maybe he had set it up or something.
no, he just
Hmm.
and Fraser, he's such an interesting guy. He grew up in that house that
Mm-hmm.
they called the house that her built.
Yep. On Benedict Canyon, right?
Just below
Yeah.
Mulholland.
With the tennis court and all that.
Tennis courts, which was what he was known for, was
Yeah.
the tennis games, the pool. But his father built the house.
Right.
And his father was an architect, and when Heston was a boy, his mother remarried and took him away from where he grew up. She took him to Chicago. He
Hmm.
eventually went to uh, uh, University of
Wait,
Illinois.
are you saying Chuck's father designed that house?
Yeah, he was.
Really?
Uh, but they hadn't. He kind of was taken away from his father
Hmm.
when his mother remarried, and she married someone called Heston.
No
That's
kidding.
where, and she renamed his first name wasn't Chuck. She renamed him Chuck Heston at the age of 10 or 11, and that's how he grew up as Chuck Heston, a
Wow.
manufactured person,
Wow.
which, and then he went to the University of Illinois. His family, the second husbands or the stepfathers, had a lot of influence at the
Mm.
university. He was a wealthy guy, and got Chuck into it. So he didn't, he was a backwoods kid.
Wow.
He grew up chopping wood with his father, hunting rabbits to eat. And
Running
when,
away from home.
yeah,
Yeah.
so suddenly he's in this wealthy environment, and he has to go to university, and he has no idea what he wants to do, but he goes. And one day he's sitting in a classroom, and there's a girl in front of him. It's the only girl he's ever actually been that close to since public school, since he was a kid.
Right.
And she had pigtails. So he's sitting behind her in the middle of the class. He started pulling her pigtails. And she turned around and she, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I was just touching your hair. It's so pretty."
Mm.
Anyway, he found out that she annoyed at him and, "Don't touch my hair again." Found out she was in the acting department of the university.
Mm.
So he went to try out for a play that he knew she was going to be in.
Mm.
They wound up getting married, and they were
That
married.
was Lydia.
Lydia. They were married for 63 years,
Amazing.
totally devoted to each other. When I was writing the book, I recently moved in New York City to another place, but I was living on 50th in the Hell's Kitchen area, which is now, Heaven's Kitchen. Um,
Mm.
it turned out that Heston had lived 2 blocks away from me in a fifth floor walk up with Lydia when they were both trying to be stage actors.
No kidding.
And it just, those
Wow.
things happen. I went over to the building, I got in, I walked up to the floor just to get a feel of it.
Yeah.
Uh, what made his career was live TV.
Hmm.
Because all these actors, including Heston, when they got out of the military, this was, I think, World War II or Korea. I forgot what he did service for. He was stationed out in Washington State.
Right.
He was in an accident, not in action, but he had an accident. And he was discharged, and he and Lydia moved to New York. They did some summer stock, but he could go. You could go take acting lessons, go to acting school for free on the GI Bill.
Mm.
That's why in the '60s, when you sometimes I watch old Perry Masons when they run them here, and they're fun to watch because the same actors are in every
Yeah, right.
episode.
No, that's so true. Also, a
And
lot of those early sitcoms too. You'll see somebody in Andy
that's
Griffith show and such show, and
that's
they're all
and
because in their minds, Mark, it appears once and it's done, right? They don't understand that home video's coming up soon or reruns are coming up.
that's right. Like movies,
Right.
like movies in the
Right.
'40s, which Heston had a lot Heston and Reagan actually had a lot to do with the idea of residuals.
We haven't
So
even gotten to Reagan yet. Oh my goodness, running out of time here, but keep going.
when they got out of school, out of the military, all these guys, they wanted to meet girls. That was
Right.
their big thing. It's, they stationed overseas. They might have met a couple of French girls, and they suddenly, I want to meet beautiful women. And so they all went to acting school because they figured that's where pretty girls were
Right.
in movie theaters. And it was paid for by the GI Bill. So that's why they all went, including Heston.
Right.
And so he met a guy who put him in a show with Lynn Fontaine, where he had a small part. Fontaine loved him
Mm.
and introduced him to Schaefer, was the fellow who directed Planet of the Apes. Schaefer, I think his name is,
Okay.
who was a TV director,
Right.
live TV, came out of live TV. And he, on Fontaine's recommendation, he put him into all these live TV broadcasts, Playhouse 90, Studio Ones, you know, where the studio was about 6 feet wide. And when they wanted to change the set, the actor turned his head and there'd be another set behind him. And that's how they did them. And that training is how Heston developed that kind of stoic,
Right.
tight-lipped, because that was what TV was before
Right.
it moved to the West Coast. So that's how he broke in,
Yeah.
was the GI Bill.
Before we move on from Heston, two quick stories, then I want to spend the last part about you. I was at Chuck's house doing an interview back in the 90s, and he was such an incredible gentleman. We had a glitch in the tapes. Remember these old Sony Betacam tapes? And it was a manufacturer's defect afterwards, I found out. So I had to call him and say, Mr. Heston, I need to shoot the interview over again. And I was expecting him to say, are you effing kidding me? And he was just a pure gentleman, said, sure, no problem. And then I invited him to speak to a group of artists that I was running at the time. And he calls me up, or I called him, and he said, now you want me to recite poetry, right? And I said, no, Mr. Heston, we talked about you sharing about your life and your career. Without batting an eye, he said, you want me to recite poetry, right? So, I'm not going to argue with Moses. So I said, yes, sir, poetry. He just had that commanding presence that silenced all questions or opposition.
He also, it doesn't get credit for things like helping to establish AFI, the American Film
Right.
Institute.
Yes, correct. Right there off the
They
101.
have never honored him.
Yeah, I guess you're right. The politics got in the way, didn't it?
Yeah. And I interviewed the woman who was running it when I wrote the book. And, nothing but great things to say about him. But
Yeah.
Frazier said to me, yeah, they've never honored my dad. And he started the whole thing.
Well, Mark, what did you learn from all these great men and women that you brought into your life? How did this impact you, Marc Eliot? How have you benefited and grown from these experiences you had?
That's a good question to ask somebody else about me. It made me a better writer. I can tell you that. It's besides, I began. I was a child actor, and I did Broadway. I did television, but I always wanted to play the leading man, and I always got cast as the bad kid. I was always, and you know me, I'm an easygoing guy. I love to talk. I love movies. And the last thing in the world I have is the bad kid. My older brother was the real bad kid. But I had a kind of a look that they thought, a lot of kids in theater when I was in it and TV, a lot of them were, if not gay, kind of effeminate, or their mamas made them. And I didn't have any of that. I was right off the street, so I always got those roles. And after a while, it didn't do anything for me. And then I was in a play with Jerry Stiller, who was
right, Seinfeld fame.
Yeah. I was 13 or 14. He talked to me like I was 40. And his wife, Ann Mirror, was the equity babysitter.
Have you seen the documentary that Ben did about them?
Yeah, I saw it.
Terrific.
It was good. It really wasn't a biography, but it was good.
Yeah.
I was allowed not to go to school, junior high school, I think I was in, because I was in this play. And equity has a provision that you must have a babysitter. You have to have milk at 3 o'clock and cookies and then take a nap. Well, none of that. I mean, Anne, who I loved like a mother, had no idea what that was about. I was just part of the show. And so we'd rehearse and then we'd sit around and we'd talk. And Jerry loved to talk about acting. He loved to talk about, the theater and method acting. I loved it. And no milk, no cookies, no naps. We just did the show.
Wow.
But as I progressed, I was in a show and I said, this script is so awful. This is really bad. I could write better than this. And did. and actually made the transition to writing because I thought I could do it better. And then biography, I didn't intend to be a biographer, but one of my best friends was a fellow called Phil Ochs, I don't know, a folk singer from the village. He and I made a movie actually together, produced a movie, and we had some great times. He used to come up to the house all the time, especially toward the end when he was really not well.
Right.
When he died in 1978, 76, when he died in 1976, I was devastated. So I was part of that village scene and got to know all the musicians, most of them. I met Dylan a few times, but and I have a story in my book about Bob Dylan and Death of a Rebel, which is the book I wrote about Phil, my first book. Um, I'll tell you a funny story about that in a minute. Um, Dylan and Phil were kind of the co-princes of the village. But Dylan always made a point of saying that he wasn't a topical folk singer,
Right.
that he wasn't a journalist, that he was a poet, a lyrical writer, and used to make fun of Phil. And he and Bobby Newworth, who was another musician who hung out with Dylan, who Dylan liked. Um, he was kind of the J.D. Vance to Dylan. Uh, um, whenever they would see Phil, they'd openly make fun of him. And Phil loved Dylan. He thought Dylan was the greatest everything. So it was a very difficult relationship for Phil, not for Dylan.
Right.
And one day they were at a place called the Gaslight Club in Greenwich Village, and Dylan said, "You know, I'm much more famous than you are. Everybody knows who I am. Nobody knows who you are. And I'll prove it to you. So the next person who walks into this door, let's find out." So somebody walks in, and Dylan says to them, "Do you know who I am?" And the fellow, "You're Bob Dylan." And Dylan says, "You don't know who I am." It's great. I said, "You don't know who I am.
Oh
You
my
don't really know who I am."
God. Mark, did I tell you? I don't think I told you about this, Mark. Sorry to interrupt, but when Bob gave me that song for the soundtrack, for the Reagan soundtrack, so this is not first person, but I heard this from a guy who was in the session. That Bob wandered over from the session to the Nashville, I think it's the Songwriters Museum or Hall of Fame or something, museum maybe. And apparently he went in there, and there was a girl at the front, and she said, he was like, "Well, what is the Songwriters Museum?" And she didn't recognize him at all. And so she gives him a pamphlet and information on the Songwriters Museum. And he came back later and just laughed about how she had no clue who he was. And I think he likes it that way. He likes these anonymous pop-ins. But here she is giving a brochure on songwriting to the greatest songwriter in history.
Yeah, funny. He's as you know, he's a little bit idiosyncratic in his ways. But when you have that much fame at that early an age, it's something he always tried to get away from. He just didn't. It was too much for him.
So, Mark, in your humble spirit, you've somehow managed to turn the conversation back away from you and on to the others. So let me bring it back to you to land this plane, because I want to hear more about you and what you gleaned that made you a better person through all these experiences you've had.
Well, I'm not sure I'm a better person. I'm not sure I was ever a pretty good person. I just the first thing you learn as an actor and also as a writer is observing. You have to observe. And then you have to understand what it is you're looking at, what it is you're feeling, as much as what it is you're thinking. When I went to Columbia University, I was mentored by Andrew Saris, who was the great film revolutionary critic in America, who brought the auteur theory to America, which now everybody talks about auteurism like it's something you can be, as opposed to something that is a critical evaluation. But he taught me so much about being on the outside, being not part of what you are writing about. And just hearing him, watching him, and seeing how he wrote, knowing him as opposed to just reading him, was probably the best lesson I ever got as a writer. When from my work, you learn a little bit about humility, whether you have it or not. I don't know if I have it, but you come to understand what people go through off the stage, away from the camera, the dramas of their lives, the difficulties, the tragedies, and how what the public knows is the tip of the iceberg. The very tip is what they see, and all that stuff below is who they are. And that's where I like to go. I like to go under the surface to try to find out who they are. And then by doing so, you learn about yourself. I have some friends who are writers whose work does not rank highly with me because they don't know who they are. Before they can write about somebody else, without knowing who they are, they're basically aping styles. They're copying. They're mimicking. When I told you before about when I was an actor and I kept on being cast in a way that I didn't think was me, it was the beginning of my understanding who am I? Where do I belong? I'll tell you who helped me a great deal was Phil when he was alive. He was very accessible and very interested in what I did and what I was trying to do. When toward the end, when he was really in bad shape, Phil, like all of them, Dylan, all that village group, they loved the movies. They used to go to the movies up at Times Square where they had 3 pictures for a quarter, 24 hours a day, and those theaters before pornography got them. They were old vaudeville theaters turned into movie theaters. And they'd go and sit there and they'd watch movies all day. And then go at night, go and play. So Phil knew that I was studying film history. And one day I said to him, you ought to come with me. You have to hear this guy. He's amazing, Andrew Sarah. No, come on. So he came up, we sat in the back, and Phil everything opened up. He just felt, here's a guy who I understand, who I can actually learn something from.
Right.
And that is so important, the ability to let yourself learn, to let yourself be open. When people on the right think I'm a communist, people on the left think I'm a conservative.
That's how you end up at Freedom Fest.
That's exactly right. I wrote a book about Reagan in Hollywood.
Right.
And one day I got a call a Saturday morning. I picked up the phone and, hey, is this Marc Eliot? I said, yeah, who's calling? He said, I'm not a lawyer, so don't hang up. My name is Mark Skousen. And they went into the whole thing. You wrote this book, and we'd like to have you at the Freedom Fest. And that's how it happens.
And we should say that's where the libertarians gather once a year, which we like to hang out with the libertarians.
We love libertarians because they're as crazy as we are. It's a fun crowd. It always is. And we're going there this year. Yeah. It's my 11th journey to Freedom Fest. Yeah. And then I do stuff on Newsmax. And, people say, well, you're definitely a right-winger.
I think you are a perfect classic traditional old-fashioned liberal. This is
Well,
what liberals used to be like, open-minded, listen to everything, right?
I think liberal's a dirty word. Did you ever hear Phil's song "Love Me, I'm a Liberal"? Um, I'm not anything.
Well,
I don't.
I meant that as a compliment, like a Bill Maher type of
Yeah.
situation, you
Well,
know.
I mean, if you think he's a liberal, then I'm a liberal.
Well, Bill will say like, I've never moved. You guys have all moved.
Yeah.
The same person I've always been for 40 years. You guys have all gone nuts on me.
I mean, yeah, I try not to classify myself politically because I don't feel that I'm a political person.
Fair
Um,
enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
um, I, but at the same token, I have no problem doing things with left-leaning people, with right-leaning people. I don't allow that to shelter my experience. So, I've written about Ronald Reagan, who was both a liberal and a conservative,
Right.
Charlton Heston, who was both a liberal and a conservative,
Right.
Merle Haggard. One of my biggest books, Merle Haggard, and Merle was not a liberal. Merle was,
But also, Mark, the times have rejiggered things a little bit. Like with the COVID, for instance, with COVID, you have Billy Graham's son Franklin saying get the shot, and you have Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s son saying don't get the shot. That's a re-scrambling of things. The war in Iran, you've got certain neoconservative, progressive liberals saying let's go get them, conservatives like Tucker Carlson saying no. So I mean, there is a rejiggering going on of the labels.
when I say I'm not a political person, I don't mean that I'm not political. I certainly have opinions and feelings and emotions
Right.
about what's going on in the country, who's doing this, who's doing that, but I don't let it restrict my work.
Or your
I don't,
friendship, or your friendships.
or my friendships, or anything.
Yeah.
I used to go to China a lot. Um, uh, when I was invited to China back in the 80s when they were opening up to write about Chinese youth. And
Mm.
I remember my girlfriend at the time crying, saying, if you go there, you'll never come back. They'll put you in jail. You know how you are. You say what's on your mind, and I'll have to go be writing letters to you.
Mm.
Don't worry. I said, I'll be fine. I went there and I discovered a world so different than the way we think China is from the
Mm.
media.
Right.
And I found that that lesson that I learned about that applies to so many things that we think are factual that are not factual.
Right.
Um, and travel is one of the great ways to learn.
Hmm.
Um, I have great Chinese friends, but I'm not a communist. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Uh, Phil was a democratic socialist. I'm not a democratic socialist, but that didn't interfere with what we did together. We
Right.
worked. I'll
Well,
tell you a funny
yeah.
story. This will may find it funny for all the people who want to be writers. Here's how I did it. When Phil died and committed suicide,
Mm.
uh, I decided that I was going to write a book about him,
Mm.
a biography, because I knew him. I thought I knew him in a way people didn't who weren't close to him. And I thought, well, I'll write a book about him. I was still acting at the time and going to Columbia for my graduate work. So I said, well, there was a book that they used to sell called How to Be a Writer. It was a book, came out every year,
Yeah.
and every wannabe writer bought it for one reason. At the back of the book, they had a list of agents and publishers. And
Right.
that's the only reason people bought it, was to
Right.
get the list of agents and writers
Right.
and publishers. So I bought the book. There was a list of not agents, editors and publishers.
Right.
So Phil and I had just made this movie together, and the opening of the film rather startling, and it became the basis of a proposal, because it said in that book you need to write a proposal, and that's how you get a book published. So I took part of what we had on the film and turned it into a proposal. Basically, Phil being crazy and talking about Patricia Hearst and all that stuff.
Right.
I sent it to 36 editors, 36 publishers, everyone who was listed in that book. And they all started coming back with letters. Thank you for sending this to us. No, thank you. And finally, around 30 letters in, I got a letter from an editor who said, "This is very good, but it's not for us." I had no idea what that meant, so I called him up, and he's kind of annoyed. "Who is this? Who?" I said, I sent you that Phil Ochs stuff. You said it's not for you. Could you tell me what that means?" "It means we don't want it." He hung the phone.
Yeah, it's Hollywood speak for we don't want your book. We're just trying to be nice about it.
That's right. They're trying to be nice, which I didn't have a concept of.
Now you know.
Finally, there was one. There were two people left out of the 34 had said no. The 35th, in his no, said, "You need to have an agent. You can't. Don't send this over the transom," meaning just narrow it in.
Right.
You need to have an agent. No one is going to buy this without an agent.
Right.
So I said, "Oh, okay, an agent. Who do I know that's an agent?" The only agent I'd ever heard of was the William Morris Agency, because in the Groucho Marx movie, they always talked about William Morris. So I said, "Well, I'll go to the William Morris Agency." So they used to be at the MGM building on 53rd or 4th, right off 6th Avenue in New York. So I went up there, and in those days, this is 1976, you could walk into the building without being searched and going through machines, and you just walk in. And the William Morris office had, I think, 13 floors, and each floor had a different division. There was movies, there was television, and up on the top there was a literary floor. So I took the elevator up, and I walked in, and there was a pretty young secretary there, and I said, "I want to see an agent." And she said, "Who are you?" Yeah. I said, "I'm Marc Eliot. I have a project. I want to see an agent." And she looked at me and she said, "We have a guy who just started and has no clients. Maybe he'll see you."
Whoa. Mark,
So
that's your lucky break.
my whole life is a lucky
Oh
break.
my goodness.
So she called him up, called him back, and "Do you want to see this guy? He says he's got a book." "Yeah, send him in." So I walked in here, nothing in his office, just a desk, no pictures, no shelves, nothing. Just started. He came right out of the mailroom. So, "Okay, what have you got?" So I sat there for, an hour pouring out this Phil Ochs thing. And he said, "Let me think it over. Call me tomorrow." So I walked out and figured, well, I've got an agent. The next morning, at 9 o'clock in the morning, the 36th letter that I had sent out, I got a phone call from Doubleday. And it was this young kid who said that we've been pushing this around at meetings, and nobody knows what to do with it. But I went to the head of this division. The division, it was a Doubleday was the Anchor Press was the division. And they said, if he doesn't want too much money, buy it.
Right.
He said, "So I want to buy the book." And I was floored. I mean, floored. And I said to him, You'll have to talk to my agent. So, who's your agent? I said,
As
Mel
of yesterday.
Not even yet. I said, Mel Berger at William Morris, my agent.
Wow.
Okay, he said, I'll call him.
And he's still your agent to this day.
Oh, my agent, that's right. So I hang the phone up and I call William Morris and I get Mel on the phone. He goes, who is this? And it's Marc Eliot. I said, who? I said, Marc Eliot. I was there yesterday. Yeah, I was that Phil Ochs thing. He said, look, I said, wait. I just got a call from Doubleday and they want to buy the book. What?
Incredible.
Up into a cab, come up here. I'll pay for the cab. I'll meet you in front of the building. So I got into a cab, went up there. He was standing outside with a contract, the William Morris contract. And he made me sign it on the hood of the taxi. And then we went in and he said, I'll close the deal at Doubleday. And that's how I got my book.
And he probably doubled the money too.
It wasn't a lot of money, but it was money for me.
Well, I think that's a great note for us to end on, that you make your own luck. You don't just sit around and wait for things to happen. But you're out there. If you hadn't had that meeting and sent those letters out, so it's a great tribute to you and your work ethic. Well, thanks for stopping by and sharing all these great stories. We could have gone on for hours and hours. We'll pick it up without the audience in Vegas, but I'm glad that they could get a little bit of a taste of you and your life and your working career.
I'm looking forward to seeing you in Vegas.
Thanks for dropping in today, Marc.
Take care.